Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Matt Williams. I'm a tutor in politics and what is known as the Access Fellow here at Jesus College at the University of Oxford. Now, what is one of the most common reasons why people fail to get into highly competitive universities like Oxford? Now, my theory is that it's commonly to do with subject choice. It's very hard to verify this theory, in other words, to establish whether or not someone chose the wrong subject. But what we do know is that people who are perhaps the first generation in their family to apply to university, they may come from lesser privileged backgrounds. They cluster their applications around our most competitive degree programs. For good reason. They may be familiar with those sorts of subjects, or they may think that those subjects have a better career payoff eventually. So for example, subjects like computer science and economics and management, those are great degrees, they will provide great careers. But the truth is that any degree at Oxford will provide you with a fantastic career. And actually, you'll be more successful if you apply for a subject that you have a passion in, that you enjoy. And a lot of people play it a little bit safe in their decision-making processes. And what I'm going to be talking about in this video is how to make the best decision for yourself in whatever thing you're trying to achieve in life. Any decision you're trying to make could be to do with universities, could be anything. And I want to untangle the processes, the psychological processes we go through as individuals when we make any decision, and to think about how we can optimize those so that we make the right decision, and also so that we make the decision right, if that makes sense. In other words, once we've made a decision, we can commit to it. And there's a personal component to this, which is that I came very late to deciding which degree I wanted to study, and I was sort of caught up in the confusion as to what I should do and how I was supposed to discover in the universe that thing about me that was the right course for my life. And then I began to realize, the more I went along, that I should be following my skills and my passions, because then I'll do everything better. A happy person is an efficient worker, basically. And I should have realized that earlier, and that's why I'm sharing it with you now. But also that in order to make decisions that work, you have to work at them. So once you've made the decision, don't treat it like some sort of fateful thing where everything else is then beyond your control. You are constantly having to make that decision work every single day. You make it work better for you. Okay, so let's go through a few slides so that we can untangle what's going on here. Now, the psychology of choice is really fascinating. One of the things to recognize is that when applying to a competitive university like Oxford, you're confronted by what's described as the paradox of choice, which is a situation wherein you have so many things to choose from, so many options, that it becomes ironically impossible to pick amongst them. So we've got a lot of degree programs. You can see an A to Z course listing. I'll link it in the description below. And there are loads of things you can do, and it can become very difficult for people to decide what to choose. And so the temptation is to play it safe and to choose something that you're familiar with. But actually that can be ironically a very unsafe thing to do if you want to maximize your chances of success. Let's say, for example, you're studying physics, maths and further maths at school, and you're interested in pursuing physics at university. Fine, great. If you're really passionate about physics, that is a good choice. But let's say you're actually more interested in the applied side of physics. Imagine if you realize that we have a degree called material science at Oxford. The success rate for material science is 1 in 4. So for every 4 applicants, 1 person gets a place. The success rate for physics is 1 in 10. And a lot of people apply to physics simply because it is familiar. It's a known quantity, and people recognize that it has a pretty clear pathway into the labour market. In other words, it's a good job. It's a good degree to take if you want a good job. But material science is exactly the same. You can get a great job out of that. And many people would probably be more fired up by something like material science. They just don't know it exists, or they don't know that it could be a better path for them. So you've got to do a bit of homework, and that's really hard, because if you look on the UCAS website, for example, it will show you that there are literally tens of thousands of different degree programs in the United Kingdom, and hence the paradox of choice. You're so sort of overwhelmed by the options that it can become very difficult to choose. Now, one thing to therefore recognize before improving your decision-making processes is cognitive biases that we all tend to carry around with us. I'm going to wear my tinted glasses because I'm half blind. And these can exist with regards to universities at the individual and at the institutional level. So at the individual level, we may carry around with us what's known as the actor-observer bias, which is where we suggest that other people have personalities that are determined from within, whereas for us everything is imposed from without. So for example, when I was a kid, I might have described my sister as being really annoying because she's an annoying person. So I was imputing to her a personality of annoyingness, right? And that described her behavior. It's not true, by the way. She's not annoying much. Okay, so I suggested she's annoying and therefore her actions are annoying to me. Whereas if I was ever to annoy her, that would be because circumstance forced me to be annoying, right? It's not in my control. This was coming from without, not from within. Now, this actor-observer bias is important when it comes to universities because sometimes we can be tempted to think, well, I don't have the capacity to find my choices. I don't have the capacity to determine what I should do in my life because fate is determining it for me or other people are imposing it on me. Whereas all the other people, they get to choose their course in life. What I'm getting at here is that we tend to suggest of ourselves that we have much less agency, much less control than we would ever suspect of another person. So we look on another person, we think they've got their stuff together, they know what they're doing, they are more in control than I will ever be. And that's a bias. It's not accurate. It can't be accurate. If you think other people are capable of choice, then of course you are as well. So we need to be careful with that. There's also what's known as anchoring bias, which is where we might put too much emphasis on an early piece of information to the detriment of all subsequent information. And so we anchor our thoughts to that early sort of input. So it could be, for example, someone tells you when you're a kid, you'd make an amazing doctor. And that could be true. And you might sort of fixate on that thought, but you might fixate on it to the extent that you don't critically evaluate it. You don't think, well, would I be a good doctor? Would I actually enjoy being a doctor? Would I enjoy medical sciences? Would I enjoy the practice of medicine? And so you don't allow yourself to go into that process of proper, rigorous decision making because you're anchoring everything to that statement that someone said. It's not to say that they had ill feelings or they were trying to undermine your thought processes, but it's just there and it's hard to dislodge it. Okay, we also have what are called availability biases, which is totally understandable. You take decisions based on available data and evidence, and this is a crucial point. You have to widen the umbrella of your data gathering. That's a really tortured metaphor, but you need more data basically, right? So what information you have available to make decisions from, there needs to be more of it if you're going to make a better decision. And that's the whole point of this whole YouTube channel, is to try and give people more accurate, more useful information. Okay? On an institutional level, we might suffer from what's called confirmation bias, which is that we might have a thesis in our minds about an institution. It could be, everything Oxford does is awful, or everything Oxford does is amazing. And then any evidence that we subsequently receive will either confirm or will confirm our prior thesis. So, I knew that would happen because everything Oxford does is awful, or everything Oxford does is amazing. Either way, it's just confirmation bias, okay? So we need to, again, critically assess our information, critically assess our biases. Other things that can have a similar impact on our approach to institutions are what's known as the halo effect, which is related to what I've just said, but it's where you think that certain institutions or certain individuals can do no wrong. And selection bias, which is that, let's say we've determined already that we're only going to select from a certain number of degree programs at a certain range of universities. Let's say, for example, you've decided, I'm definitely going to do maths and it's definitely going to be at the Russell Group. Well, that whenever you find evidence that might disconfirm your ideas about maths, Russell Group, you will go back to those initial biases and say, but those thoughts must be wrong. So rather than having a proper critical reflection on your thoughts and your choices, you could just be reinforcing your biases. So you've just got to be aware of these. It's not that the biases are wrong per se, it's just you've got to be aware of them and you've got to critically evaluate them. And in order to evaluate them, you need to sort of assess, what is it that you individually value? What is it that you want? Now, this sounds like sort of extraordinary hedonism, right? That I'm sort of asking you to be self-indulgent and to just determine, who am I and what do I enjoy, and let's just have a fun life. But there is actually a really searingly important bit of rational choice going on here. In other words, having fun, enjoying yourself, these are not sort of flippant, self-indulgent things. These are very, very cold, efficient ways to live a good life, because people that enjoy what they do everything better. They employ their resources, such as their time, their money, their patience, their energy, in a vastly more efficient way because they want to reach the end. They're committed, they're determined. So having fun and enjoying yourself and determining what you value and what you want to do is not sort of self-indulgent hedonism. It is just cold-headed, rationalism. Okay, and I want you to think about it like that. So that's why we always say, ooh, pick what you enjoy, because it's sensible, good advice, right? Now, how are you supposed to sort of get yourself out of the paradox of choice? You've got this sort of thousands and thousands of degree programs throughout the United Kingdom. How are you supposed to get your way out of this? To clear the fog, I mean, the first thing to say is don't procrastinate. It's always easy to just say, oh, well, tomorrow fate will tell me exactly what degree I'm supposed to be doing. No, it won't, right? Remember the actor-observer bias, you've got to act. You have more agency than you probably recognize, so you've got to act. And a particularly useful thing to do is to act as if you are already a student of a particular degree program. These days, universities provide tons of resources on what students would do on a day-to-day basis on their particular programs. So going back to my example of material science, why don't you act as if you are already a student of material science at Oxford University? Go and read some of the things that those students read, which are listed online. Go and watch some of the lectures that they would watch, which are on YouTube. Go and just pretend to be a student of that degree for a day, a couple of days. See how it goes, right? If by the end of those few days you're thinking, that was all right, but I'm not sure it's ideal for me, then test another hypothesis. Act as if you're a student of earth sciences. Act as if you're a student of engineering. Act as if you're a student of physics, right? Pretending to be what you aspire to be is a very good training ground to work out if it is actually something that you want, right? It also provides you with tons of useful evidence to put in a personal statement along the lines of, I know what I'm signing up for here because I've done it. Okay, so when you're writing a personal statement, you can say I've read relevant stuff, I've seen relevant lectures, because you literally have. Okay, so act as if you've already taken this choice, like it's already happened, and you're committed to it already, because that can be a really good way to get through it. Be careful with decision fatigue. Be aware of the possibility of just defaulting to a that'll do position, of just sort of trying to make your life easy, or indeed farming out your decisions to other people to take them on your behalf. You've got to own that decision. Again, that's part of the process of ensuring that you make the decision work for you. Once you've taken a decision, it's not like then fate just unfolds for the rest of your life. You have to keep applying energy in order to make that decision work as well as possible, right? So in other words, you've got to make the decision work every single day. And you can't therefore just allow someone else to take that decision on your behalf. Although, of course, we want to make other people happy, and there's a good morality to that of not upsetting or disappointing other people around us, or worrying them unduly with the choice you've made. At the same time, it is ultimately your decision, and it's you that has to own it. So you've got to be able to live with it, right? And you've got to be fairly careful with the distinction between satisficing decisions versus maximising decisions. Now, this is where we might sort of differentiate someone who takes a decision just that is clearly within their capabilities versus a decision which is more of a stretch, is a bit more of a reach to something that could be a bit more difficult, a bit more competitive. Now, therefore, what's the difference between a sort of realistic and a delusional decision making? In other words, a decision where someone takes it where they clearly are not appropriate. So for example, if someone applies to Oxford University, is that in many cases delusional? Well, no. In fact, far fewer people apply to Oxford than would be eligible. So we certainly do not see a large number of people applying who are utterly out of their mind deluded. In fact, quite the opposite. If you are on course to obtain the right grades for our degrees, then you are not in any sense deluded. And it's safe in the British system to apply to a university that is highly competitive because you've got up to 5 choices on your UCAS form. So if one of those happens to be Oxford or Cambridge or another highly competitive university, then that is not a delusional act, provided that you are on course to obtain the grades that you need. So I think you can balance out satisficing and maximising decisions. In other words, when you've got 5 options of degree programs you can pursue, if some of those are clearly going to be slightly safer than others, what we might call an insurance choice, great, go for it. Why not stretch yourself? Why not see what happens? The only way to guarantee you won't get into a university like Oxford or Cambridge is not apply. And that's one of the biggest problems that we face as institutions, is that people who are clearly eligible just don't apply because they don't think that they would ever fit in or they would ever be capable. And they're often wrong about that because they don't have enough information, right? So that's the thing. All decisions depend on good data, good information, and how you deal with that information. We also need to be careful with the notion of an optimal decision. I think sometimes people get paralyzed by this idea of I've got to find the right decision, like it's out there existing independently of us in the universe. Like there is an objectively right decision for us to take. Others might take the extreme opposite view and say there is a clearly just entirely subjective notion of what a good decision is. In other words, only I can understand what is right for me. I think the reality is more likely in between those two extremes and what we would call intersubjectively optimal. In other words, it's a decision that you and other people can see is right for you, but it's not the best decision in some sort of objective scientific sense that we could all go out and test it. So what does that concretely mean? It means that yes, you need to talk to other people about the options that you've got available. Yes, you've got to be happy with your decision. No, you're not going to discover the right choice. And no, certainly not is the right choice going to just find you. You have to go out there and do the work. And then crucially, as I mentioned over and over, you've got to make that decision work every single day. So once you've taken a decision, that's not the end of the story. You've got to keep working at it. But I think the problem a lot of people have is that they are waiting for a decision to just come to their door. And that's not going to happen. You have to act, you have to take steps in order to find a decision that's going to work for you. And so one thing that you can do in order to optimize your choices is to come up with a decision matrix. And here's an example of someone trying to figure out which tourist attraction they want to go to. And it's quite useful because it just sort of shows the different cells and the different weighting that they might put on different criteria. And you can do the same thing for university choices and for degree programs. You can figure out the different variables that will be important to you. So it could be stuff like employability. It could be things like the course structure. It could be the cost of the course. It could be connections to industry. It could be all sorts of different criteria. And then you weight them according to your own desires and your own thoughts of what matters. And again, this is where the subjective component comes in. And then you fill in the cells and you do it sort of rigorously and scientifically. You strip out the biases. You don't allow yourself to be led by your prejudices or suppositions about what you think is right, but you do it properly and scientifically. And after having acted as if you are already a student of some of these degree programs and you've gone and read what these students read and you've gone and done what these students would do, that is a much more sort of rigorous scientific approach to decision making, and it'll lead to better decisions and therefore decisions that you can live with and decisions that you can make the best of every single day. Okay, so I would highly recommend that. So crucial to all of this is data, information, advice and guidance, and who or what you're supposed to trust. There are a lot of data sources out there on university courses, and you've got to be pretty careful. Things like the Student Room and Reddit can be useful, but they can also be full of nonsense, bluntly. So you've got to be very careful as to who or what you're supposed to trust. The universities have an interest in giving you accurate information. For one thing, if they didn't, they could potentially be legally liable. So they have to be accurate. They can't sort of sell you a pup, right? So you're going to get pretty clear and good information from the universities if you go to their websites. You can also sort of have a look at what graduates of those degrees have done. So you can go and look on LinkedIn and you'll find people with their bios will say graduate of X subject from X university, and you can see what they're doing, what sort of jobs they're doing. So you can get a real sense of what the labour market looks like for graduates of any degree that you're interested in. But fundamentally, I would go back to the university websites because those are the primary sources of data and information. They will tell you about employability, they will tell you about course structure and costs, they will tell you all of the things that you need to fill out the cells of your decision matrix. And I think that should be your first and not necessarily last, but certainly your first port of call. But certainly be careful of going to any of those websites that will just reinforce any of the biases that I was talking about at the start. Okay. Now, what about future proofing? Well, this is a really interesting topic. How are we supposed to ensure that the decisions we make are safe, not just for now, but also for the long term? That's obviously a remarkably difficult thing for me to answer. The thought process amongst many people is that STEM is safe and humanities is increasingly unsafe in the labour markets. As of now, when I'm talking to you, there's very little evidence for that. I mean, yes, STEM is safe in the labour market, but the idea that humanities don't set you up with good career prospects is not at all borne out by the evidence. Amongst our most highly employable graduates at the University of Oxford are modern languages students. And actually modern languages is relatively undersubscribed. So you'd have a much higher chance of being admitted for a modern languages degree at Oxford, and also a very high chance of being employed. And part of the reason for that is because modern languages provide you with fantastic transferable skills. So those are skills that can be adapted to all sorts of different labour market conditions. And even if lots of parts of the economy become automated or transplanted by artificial intelligence, if you've got those transferable skills, you can up sticks and move around and implant yourself somewhere else pretty easily. And that's the beauty of the sort of academic degrees that we've been teaching at Oxford University for 950 years. So I think you just need to be slightly careful about sort of writing off certain degrees as useless pieces of paper, because there really aren't many at the top universities like Oxford, certainly not according to the data. Now, can I look into my crystal ball and make a clear prediction about that? Well, no. I mean, a prediction literally means to foretell, to sort of say something exactly as it will happen, and of course I can't do that. But projection, based on the data that we have available, there are no unsafe degrees at Oxford University. So I think we need to move away from this idea of Mickey Mouse degrees at some universities, or degrees that aren't worth the paper they're written on, and look at the data. Don't sort of go with bias and prejudice. Look at what the facts say. And at the moment, the facts suggest that humanities, social sciences degrees provide incredibly valuable transferable skills that can be applied all over the labour market. And the idea that you have to do a STEM degree to have any chance of employability is just demonstrably wrong. So please be very careful, again, with the data that you look at and what you trust. And also this idea that you have to gravitate towards certain degrees to stand a chance, because although that seems on its face to be a safe decision because you're dealing with a known quantity, actually you massively diminish your chances of being admitted because you're applying for more competitive degrees. You're applying for something that you're not necessarily that interested in, and therefore you're setting yourself up for a set of skills that you don't necessarily want to have. So although on its face applying for a very popular degree such as law or medicine is a safe decision, if it's not actually something that you're properly invested in, then it is a very, very desperately unsafe decision. So please be careful with your decision-making process. Please make it as scientific and open as possible, and let me know if you need any help in the comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But thanks so much for watching, and I wish you all the best in your decisions. Bye now.